On Tuesday, July 28th, the president of FIFA announced a plan to sell a piece of the World Cup to private investors. By Friday, July 31st, the plan was dead. In between, Europe's governing body voted to boycott FIFA tournaments. Asia and North America's confederations came out against it. And Infantino's own handpicked senior advisor resigned in protest, calling it, quote, a bad deal for football. 4 days, start to finish. Now, FIFA killed the plan, so you could argue that the system worked. But there's a harder question underneath, and it's the one that this video is about. How does the most powerful man in world football propose selling a stake in the biggest event on earth without the people who own FIFA finding out first? This isn't a hit piece, it's a case file. Here are the charges, here's the evidence, and here's the defense on every count. You reach the verdict. First, the defendant. Gianni Infantino, a Swiss-Italian lawyer, president of FIFA since February 2016. And the important part, he was elected as the cleanup man. FIFA had just been gutted by the biggest corruption scandal in sports history. Sepp Blatter was gone, indictments were everywhere. Infantino ran on transparency, governance, and reform. He'd been on FIFA's own reform committee. 10 years later, he is, by most measures, the most powerful figure the sport has ever had. He expanded the World Cup to 48 teams. He built a new 32-team Club World Cup. He pushed FIFA's revenue to record highs. The 2026 tournament is projected to generate around $15 billion. His own compensation is reported at roughly $6 million a year. So the question isn't whether he grew the business, because he did. The question is what the reform candidate turned into. So, count one. The plan that just collapsed. Here's what was actually proposed. FIFA would create a new commercial company holding the rights to its events, including the World Cup. That company would be valued at around $20 billion. Roughly 20% would be sold to private investors, raising up to $4.2 billion. The investment would be led by Thrive Capital, the firm founded by Joshua Kushner, brother of Jared Kushner, with JP Morgan running the fundraising. Now, the part that detonated it, FIFA is not a normal company. Under Swiss law, it's a non-profit association, and its effective owners are its 211 national federations. Those federations, the actual owners, say they found out when the public did. UEFA's response was blunt. It was, in their words, irresponsible and indefensible that a proposal of such significance for football was conceived in secret. And then the line that became the headline everywhere, quote unquote, the World Cup is not FIFA's to sell. Now, the defense. FIFA argued the plan would unlock commercial value the sport is leaving on the table. Money that flows back into development across all 211 members. Private capital in sport is not unusual. Investors have bought into leagues and competitions for years. The problem with the defense? None of that explains the secrecy. You can argue a deal is good, but it's much harder to argue why the owners shouldn't have been told in the first place. Because if this were a one-time misstep, it's a bad week. The case against them is that it's a pattern. Here's the record. Exhibit A, the hosting decisions. Russia 2018, Qatar 2022, a tournament that was dogged for years by reporting on migrant worker conditions. Then Saudi Arabia for 2034. The process there drew particular criticism. FIFA broke with precedent by having members decide the 2030 and the 2034 host at the same meeting, which left Saudi Arabia as the only bidder for 2034. Exhibit B, the Qatar press conference. Days before the 2022 World Cup, Infantino opened a scheduled 45-minute press conference that ran over an hour, calling critics of Qatar hypocrites, and at one point invoking racism and saying that the Western world should be apologizing for the next 3,000 years. Exhibit C, the ticket prices of this year. The North American bid promised final tickets would top out at around $1,550. In actuality, the cheapest standard final ticket ended up being $5,785, while others passed $10,000 easily. 2 U.S. state attorneys general subpoenaed FIFA. 70 members of Congress wrote in, and European fan groups filed a monopoly complaint with the European Commission. Exhibit D, the political closeness. In May 2025, Infantino arrived late to FIFA's own Congress because he was traveling with the US president in the Middle East. UEFA delegates walked out in protest. In December 2025, FIFA awarded a newly created FIFA Peace Prize to Donald Trump. Exhibit E, and this one belongs on the defense table. In 2020, Swiss authorities opened criminal proceedings against Infantino over undocumented meetings with the country's then Attorney General, who lost his job in the fallout. Those proceedings were closed in October 2023 and no charges were filed. Prosecutors said their investigation invalidated the suspicions and found no evidence of criminal acts. Infantino called it a full and clear victory. He was also cleared by FIFA's own ethics committee in separate reviews. So on the legal counts, not guilty. That's the record and it counts. The charge sheet that remains isn't criminal, it's about judgment. So why did this particular plan trigger a revolt when so much else didn't? 3 reasons. They're worth understanding properly. Reason 1, incentives. Private investors expect returns. Once outside capital owns part of FIFA's commercial rights, the pressure runs one direction. More revenue, more matches, more tournaments, more inventory to sell. That lands on a calendar players and leagues already say is overloaded. Reason 2, control. UEFA is the most powerful confederation in the sport. The Champions League, the Premier League, La Liga, the Bundesliga, Serie A. But at FIFA, Europe holds only 55 of 211 votes, which means UEFA can generate most of the sport's commercial value and still be outvoted on what happens to it. A boycott threat was the leverage they had left. Reason 3, process. And this is the one that actually killed it. The Asian Football Confederation had been one of Infantino's strongest allies for 11 years. They opposed the plan as well. And their statement went further than the plan itself, saying that it exposed fundamental weaknesses in FIFA's consultation and decision-making processes. They called for FIFA to urgently review its management style. So listen to that again. That's not opposition to a deal. That's an ally saying the problem is how the building is being run. To be fair to him, the logic wasn't insane. In FIFA's own statement, Infantino said the goal was to unleash the commercial potential and opportunity that FIFA has, pointing out to the other parts of the game have turned football's popularity into enormous commercial value. And the timing looked, from inside his office, perfect. The 2026 World Cup had just been a massive financial success. He was expected to run for a final term, unopposed. Private investment has flowed into leagues and competitions across sport for a decade. So here's the most terrible reading, and I think it's the accurate one. He didn't think he needed to ask. After 10 years of expanding tournaments and revenue with the votes always falling his way, consultation started to look optional. That's not a criminal instinct, it's the instinct of someone who stopped expecting to be told no. So where does that leave us? FIFA has set a deadline of November 18 for the presidential candidates. The election is scheduled for March in Rabat, Morocco. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Infantino is expected to run for a 4th term, which is itself contested since FIFA's statutes limit presidents to 3, and his position is that his first partial term shouldn't count. Until last week, he was expected to run unopposed. That is a much harder assumption today. Here's my read, and this part is opinion. You've got the evidence, so weigh it yourself. The legal charges didn't stick, and that matters. But leadership isn't a criminal standard, it's a trust standard. And in 10 years, the reform candidate has ended up with a hosting process critics call captured, a ticket scandal that drew subpoenas, allies asking him to review his own management style, an advisor resigning on principle, and an attempt to sell a piece of the World Cup that his own membership learned about from the news. FIFA belongs to 211 federations, and behind them, to the people who actually play and watch the game. The last 4 days proved something important. When they push back together, they win. The question in March is whether they remember that. The plan is dead. The president isn't going anywhere just yet. And the deadline for anyone to stand against him is November 18th. So tell me, where do you land in the comments? Should he go? Or did the system just prove that it works? Subscribe for more stories behind the headlines. There's a new case every week, and there's a person here reading the comments, so drop them down below. Peace.